And welcome back. This is a special half hour on the WPRO Morning News. It is 8:36, and we will, of course, update you as the morning goes on to the weather forecast and the traffic as it warrants. But right now we have a special guest in studio. It's Congressman David Cicilline joining us in town now, obviously spending his time between Washington and Rhode Island. So thank you for being here, Congressman.
My pleasure. Great to see you.
We have so much to talk about, so we are doing a special edition half hour right now. We're not going to stop. We're going to go right through. If there's any traffic alerts, we will tell all of our listeners, but they want to hear from the Congressman, that's for sure. And we were going to have a second guest, the chairman, Fred Hochberg, from the Export-Import Bank, but he had some travel snafu happen with a flight, so we'll talk about that as well.
Great, and I know, I apologize. I know he was going to be my co-host here with you, and he was looking forward to it, but apparently is not going to get in any time for the show, but hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk about his visit. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about that now, because the state as a whole, and we'll get to Providence, et cetera, but the state as a whole, we have so many issues, and we talk about it ad nauseum. The job numbers are not good, unemployment figures. We've got major pension issues. Now, this is something that you're not going to address in the time that we have, but your goal here now to work with the Export-Import Bank, would be what? You're bringing jobs into Rhode Island? Because everyone runs on that.
Sure.
Jobs.
I mean, I think there's no question that the single biggest priority that we have at every level of government is to do everything we can to get Rhode Islanders and Americans back to work. We have the third highest unemployment rate in the country. People are really hurting in our state and in our country. And so, I've been working on a whole Make It in America agenda that really focuses on how do we rebuild manufacturing in this country? How do we help manufacturers who are making things here grow jobs so that we can, again, lead the world in making things? I mean, I tell people all the time, go into a store and try to find something made in America. Yeah. It's almost impossible. It was not always that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We've lost some of the low-end manufacturing, which we'll never get back. But we have a lot of new manufacturing, a lot of high-tech manufacturing that we do. And we have lots of companies in Rhode Island, in my district, that export all over the world. I invited Fred Hochberg here, who's the president of the Export-Import Bank of America, because the Export-Import Bank's responsibility is to help small businesses increase their exports by use of capital, technical assistance, marketing, to help businesses that exist in America increase their opportunities to sell their goods to the rest of the world. 95% of the consumers in the world live outside the United States. That's a marketplace. And so what this visit is designed to do is provide assistance to small businesses on how they might increase the sales of their products outside the United States. And, we've got to start creating jobs in America. We've got to get rid of tax breaks that are shipping our jobs overseas. We've got to stop, we've got to incentivize creating good American jobs in this country. And we then have to help American businesses grow those jobs. And I'm on the Small Business Committee. We've talked a lot about this on the Foreign Affairs Committee, where I also serve. I asked to be on the Trade Subcommittee, also to get at this issue of how do we make sure that our trading partners aren't cheating. China, with their currency manipulation, they're not playing by the rules. They're stealing our intellectual property. Mm-hmm. They're not playing by the trading rules. So, we still have the best workers. We still make the best products in the world. But what we need is tax policies and trade policies and good public policies that understand that manufacturing has got to be part of our economic recovery, that we have to focus on making things in this country and selling them to the rest of the world. And I invited Fred Hochberg here to speak to small businesses, to tell them about the services of the Export-Import Bank, about the ways that he can help them grow and create more jobs. And I see that as one of my most important responsibilities.
And it's interesting that you bring up jobs on a day where Providence, I'm sure you're well aware of, maybe handing out 90-something pink slips, and then to the fire, and then 70-something to the police officers. How do you feel about that, first off?
Well, I think, look, there is no question that Providence and many other cities and towns in our state, and in fact, cities and towns all across this country, are facing the same kinds of challenges of how do you deal with the municipal budgets that are shrinking, revenues that are declining, states that have even more serious challenges, and frankly, the same kinds of things we're facing at the national level. Huge budget gaps. And it's going to require some really tough choices, some reductions in spending, some cuts that are going to be difficult. But I think there's no way, as we look at what we're facing in the budget deficit in the national government, it's going to require the same kinds of things. We've got to make some hard choices, but we have got to get our spending under control. We've got to make some cuts that are going to be difficult. But I think what we need to do at every level of government is work together, Republicans and Democrats, to find the answers to these things, to get us through these challenging times, and do it in a way that makes the reductions in spending, makes the cuts in the right places, but at the same time preserves the things we need to do to rebuild our economy. I think this is where the president got it right, where he said we have to cut spending. We have to be serious about it. But we also have to protect our investments in education, in innovation, in infrastructure, because those things are critical to rebuilding our economy. But in the short term, there are going to be great challenges for cities and towns, including Providence, great challenges for our state. And, you know, this is unfortunately a consequence of a very, very long and deep recession that continues. And also some willingness to take on some very big issues in pensions, you know, some of the legacy costs of healthcare. All of those things are things which we've got to confront at every level of government.
Now, Congressman, a cynic would say that you're here talking about jobs because you're trying to deflect what has happened with the city and the finances that had gone on. So we've got to, you know, we'll be the obnoxious reporters and bring it up again. That's been the whole controversy. Everybody had said, and accusing you of just kicking the can down the road by raiding the rainy day fund. We'll give you an opportunity to apologize for having done
it. First of all, I would say it's not a distraction. I got elected to go to Washington to fight to get Rhode Islanders back to work and do everything I can to be sure that we set the right priorities in this country. And, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the Providence city budget, and I was mayor of the city for the last 8 years, and I'm very proud of the work that we did over those 8 years. And, you know, when I look at what we accomplished in terms of the lowest crime rate the city has seen in 30 years, the creation of the Providence After School Alliance, an award-winning after-school program, winning Race to the Top, Providence took the lead in that, brought new investment to the city in the billions of dollars, produced affordable housing at 3 times the rate of the previous decade, became the first city in America to have a fully accredited emergency management Homeland Security department, and on and on. And by the way, it was the work of a great team of people, not a single person. There's no question in the last several years we faced very difficult budget challenges, and those were really caused by devastating cuts from the state of more than $50 million in the last few years, a really deep recession, and then the loss of federal education stimulus funds. Those things came together and created a gap. And, you know, every year that I was mayor, we began with revenues and expenses, and there was always a gap. And you close that gap by generating revenue and making cuts and going to the General Assembly and asking for legislation. And we were able to do that for 8 years, and we were able to do it while we maintained A ratings from our rating agencies. In the last 2 years, that became even more difficult because of the state cuts. And we made a decision. And by the way, it wasn't a decision I made alone. It was a decision we made as a city that we did not want to raise taxes. And it was because I thought, and I think the council agreed, that it was just the recession was too tough. It was really hard for families. They couldn't afford a tax increase. And so unlike most communities, I think maybe every community who reinstated the car tax and raised taxes, we didn't do it. And with the expectation or the hope that if we didn't do that and the recession began to turn around and the state was in a position to restore some of the revenues back to the cities and towns, and maybe the school funding formula were accelerated, which would bring in $26 million to the city, that combination of things would get the city through it. None of those things happened, and the revenue projections went down $20 million. So it created a challenge. The one regret I have, to your apology point, the one regret I have in all of this, because I think we made the decisions that I believed were right then and about protecting taxpayers from a tax increase. The one regret I have is that in the conversations about it, when I talked about it, I said Providence was in excellent financial condition. And what I was referring to when I talked about that was the work we had done, the cuts we had made, the pension reform we had enacted, the building up the rainy day fund, all the stuff we had done internally. I wasn't suggesting that we weren't going to face the same thing every other city and town is facing in terms of state cuts. And, you know, I was at the State House with other mayors complaining about it and lamenting what the consequences would be in my budget addresses. And so that was so obvious to me that, of course, we could take pride of being in a strong position to get through this stuff. But, of course, we were facing big challenges. I regret it. I wish I had been, you know, sort of amplified that and said, look, we're in a really strong position, an excellent position because of the work we did internally, but we face big challenges down the road because of these budget cuts.
Well, when you say you regret it, do you regret it because it wasn't true?
No, I regret it because it wasn't complete. I think it was, we hadn't done all of this work that I'm very proud of. You know, we made cuts, we enacted pension reform, we built up the rainy day fund, we got, you know, pilot payments, we got city city employees to share in their healthcare costs for the first time. So we did all that stuff, which put us in a position to really get through this, you know, put us in a very strong position to face the challenges ahead. But the idea that the state was cutting the amount of money they were cutting was something I talked a lot about with other mayors and alone, that these state cuts would be devastating. And so what was really obvious to me, maybe wasn't obvious to everybody, and so I wish
there
I'd
are those who accuse you of being less than forthcoming, especially in light of the fact that you were running for Congress and almost being duplicitous in doing this.
Yeah, no, I've heard that criticism. Look, I mean, I take my integrity and my reputation for honesty seriously. And as I said, when I talked about the work we had done to get us through this time, work that, again, wasn't just the work of one person, but of a whole team, I'm really proud of that. And I think it positioned us in a really strong way to get through really hard times.